We are back with another episode of the Brothers-in-Law podcast.
Sir.
I
Yes,
am
sir.
excited. We are on episode 6. We are moving.
We got a real one with
We
us
are
today.
moving. Yo, folks don't understand how excited I am for this episode. Folks have no idea. So yeah, I got my humble host here, Conrad Blackburn. This is my brother,
Yeah.
my brother-in-law, my friend. We've been in the game 6 years together, doing this, and so excited to have. I don't even know the proper way to introduce you. We have a legend in the game.
I feel like Game of Thrones right now. It's got to be the whole long name.
You know what I'm saying?
Breaker of chains.
From the House of Bronze. The somebody son slayer. Ooh, that's hard.
Oh no! Oh no!
Oh, no. Okay. We'll keep it professional. Okay, we'll keep it professional.
No, we don't have to do that. But,
yeah,
no, I'm not.
we have Porsha Chiffon Venable joining us today, and Porsha is a light in many regards. She's basically the supervisor of all people Black.
She's my supervisor.
She's his direct supervisor, and really the supervises and takes care of all people Black in our office at the Bronx Offenders. And I'm just so happy to have you here, Porsha. In many regards, I know you weren't working at the Bronx Offenders when we first got here, but like when we lost a few of our Black supervisors, when you came, it was just nice to know that we were still in good hands, and just so excited to have you here to work with you and to spread some knowledge here.
I'm honored. This is so dope. I've been following y'all since the first episode.
Thank you.
This is amazing. I'm happy to be here. I'm honored that y'all asked me.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
So on this episode, there's really, I guess, 3 things we want to do. Introduce people to you, let them know a little bit more about, what made you want to become a public defender, a little bit about your background, and then talk about the power of a jury, power of a juror, and introduce people to this concept known as jury nullification that we may be all aware of, but I don't know if your average citizen knows about this power.
Okay.
So, Portia, let's start off. How are you?
I'm good.
And tell us a little bit about, why you decided to become a public defender. A little bit about your path to where you are.
Why I decided to become a public defender. So I am the child of an addict. My mother was incredibly young when she had me, and my grandmother really had to stop the path of her life, like so many Black grandmothers, right? She had to stop the path of her life in order to take care of me. And my mother became an addict at the height of the crack epidemic in the 80s, right? And so a lot of people didn't know sort of what to do with people like me, or what to do with Black families that were experiencing someone with addiction and then their offspring, right? And so, I watched how the child welfare system treated my grandmother and my mother. I watched how the criminal legal system treated my mother, right? And I watched how police and prosecutors treated people in my community. And I knew that I wanted to help people. I just didn't know what that looked like. And so I went to undergrad and I was studying psychology. And psychology just didn't sit right. It didn't feel right to me because it put all of the onus on the individual. But I knew from my upbringing that it was more to that, right? There were external variables that were at play, right? Education, poverty, socioeconomic issues, and so psychology just really didn't sit right with me. So I started studying sociology, and I ultimately became a social worker at the Bronx Defenders very early. Sort of as this idea emerged that people in the criminal legal system would benefit from social workers, because
Wow.
I mean, if you know the whitewashed history of social work and how it was white women helping poor Black folks, it was, not really services that were offered to folks that were being funneled in and out of the criminal legal system.
Gotcha.
That was a long-winded way
No,
to
no,
answer
it's
you.
okay. So,
Sorry.
what made the transition from being a social worker to being a public defender?
I don't like lawyers. When
So you
I
became
was
one.
That's fair.
Yeah, when I was a social worker, I sort of watched how so many lawyers engaged in paternalism. they knew better than the people that they were representing, because they were lawyers, right? Because they were educated. And they oftentimes didn't listen to people's stories, where those stories were the things that could, carry a case, right?
Right.
And like just so much paternalism. And I was like, nah, there has to be a better way. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's the Bronx Defenders. I mean, there were brilliant lawyers that were there, but there were lawyers that I was like, nah, that ain't right. In my community,
Yeah.
right? In the
Yeah.
community that I'm born, raised, and residing in. And so, I truly believe that Black and brown people deserve the best representation that money can't buy.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to law school.
And how important was it to you to come back and do that work in the Bronx? Where you from?
Oh, it was the only thing. My eye was on the prize the entire time I was in law school, which, I definitely held a sort of privileged position, right? Because, I mean, I was lucky. Robin Steinberg promised me a job,
Mm.
when I went to law school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to kind of do law school the way I wanted to do law school. I was in Egypt. I was at PDS.
Wow.
I kind of just, I was able to kind of beat to the sound of my own drum without the pressure of worrying about where I was going to work.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was
That's
coming
nice.
back for
Must
the
be
X.
nice.
That's nice.
It was real nice. Shout out to all the other lawyers that were at the Bronx Offenders that were good.
Yeah. that
were
were good.
Oh no.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. I know that was Cliff Notes because I know your story is much more deep than that. But appreciate you.
No problem.
Yeah, I know there's so much that Porsha could cover,
So
and I
much.
wish I could just have a 5-hour episode touching on everything I wanted to talk about with you. But I think juries is what we're here for. So let's just first start out with what is the role of a juror, and why is the role of a juror important in our criminal legal system?
So, it's interesting. When I first became a lawyer, I recognized really early on the value in juries. Oftentimes, you can go anywhere around this country and lawyers will be like, oh, we need to get rid of juries because they don't understand the law. They don't understand how to do things. But I realized incredibly early on how the community, especially the Bronx community, understood the way that things were supposed to go. And so I really started thinking about how Black people can harness that power more. But to answer your question directly, the purpose of the jury on its face is to make a determination of the facts, right? So the court, they're supposed to listen to a story that the prosecutor tells them. And they're supposed to make a determination of a person's guilt or the accused guilt or innocence in a criminal trial.
Okay. Okay. And you said that the prosecutor tells them. So what would you say is kind of, I know it's kind of going off topic, but what is the defense attorney's, I guess, role in providing the jurors with whatever information that they need to know?
So, in a criminal trial, right, a defense attorney's job is to protect their client from the liars, the immorality in the courtroom, right? The prosecutor and the judge.
Yeah.
And
Call them
so,
out. Call them out.
and so in a criminal trial, it is actually the prosecutor's burden, right? To prove every element of every crime, right? And it is the defense attorney's job technically to do nothing, right? To sit back and watch and see or wait and see if the prosecutor does their job, right? And it's rare that a defense attorney does. I actually can't even think of a trial that I watch where the defense attorney did nothing, right? But if we choose, we're supposed to give an opening statement. We're supposed to cross-examine the prosecutor's witnesses. And if we deem it appropriate, to put on our own case, right? To put on our own witnesses. And the juror's job is to sit there and listen to the prosecutor, and if the defense attorney puts on a case, the defense's role. But the burden never shifts to the defense attorney, right?
Yeah.
The burden is always on the prosecutor to prove every element of every single crime.
Got you.
But we get up and, we do our thing. We cross-examine. We try to poke holes in stories. We try to show why a witness is credible or incredible. And a jury sits there and they kind of watch it, right? It's like a match. Right. And they're watching it and they're making a determination about the facts.
Okay.
So, I have friends, I have family members who oftentimes tell me like they're annoyed to even like get a summons for the jury, right? They don't want to sit on the jury. So like why is it important to be on a jury and why is it important to be?
And how can we empower people to like realize the importance of being on the jury?
Right. So when I'm training and I'm talking to people across the country about the role of juries, I try not to come to it from a place of guilt, right? Like if you have complaints about the criminal legal system, then you're an idiot. Like I don't do the vote or die approach, right?
Right.
That's not where I come to this from because people don't want to participate in jury service for legitimate reasons, right? Like although my preference would be, particularly for my community's sake, that Black and brown people participate in jury service, I can appreciate the socioeconomic barriers to not participating in a jury. I can appreciate how anxiety provoking being around police, prosecutors, judges can be. I mean, it's anxiety provoking for us, right? Doing it on a daily basis. I can appreciate the sort of uncomfortable nature of being inside of a courtroom. So I'm never going to legitimize the criminal legal system, right? So I completely respect why when you go into Google and you type in how to get out of, right? The first thing that comes up is jury duty. My boy Will Snowden of the Juror Project sort of put me onto that, and I did it and was like, oh shit, like that is so true. Like you type in Google like how to get out of, the first thing that comes up is jury duty.
Yeah.
And so I understand why people don't want to participate in it. And actually, a little bit earlier, sort of off the record, right? You and I were talking. And I was telling you how my grandmother never participated in any systems, right? She didn't participate in jury service. She didn't vote because her perspective was is that the Black voice has no value, right? And that actually is what I want to speak to when I talk to people about jury duty and sort of why they should participate in it is because their voice has value. It is because their presence has value. It is because their diversity and experience and perspective has value. And that's why as Black and brown people we should be sitting on juries and not allowing the whitewashed experience to dictate the outcome of someone's case.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I'm gonna steal that when I talk to my next friend. It's about your value, brother. You got value. Utilize that value.
You got power.
You know what I'm saying?
You do
your
though.
power.
Don't hide your light. Show your light. Show your power. I like that.
Right. But that and so that is how you sort of then transition into jury nullification, right? Because
what's that? What's jury nullification?
Yeah, let's do it. What is jury nullification?
Jury nullification is a power and not a right. And so really what community members are doing is they are listening to the facts, and for a milieu of reasons they decide to acquit the accused. So despite the fact that the prosecutor has proven every element of every crime, the jury still decides to acquit the accused.
Can we give an example what that looks like? So someone's charged with, let's say, robbery, and we're saying that the prosecutor has proven everything, like video of him doing a robbery.
Got you a 4K.
4K video, 5 witnesses.
No mask.
Everyone ID'd you, no mask, fingerprints, everything.
Yep.
And a jury is convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the standard.
Correct.
That this person is guilty of robbery.
And they still come back, look homie in the eye and say, not guilty.
And you're saying that juries have the power to do this.
They absolutely do. Who gonna check them? Who gonna check them? Once the judge does not have the power to overturn an acquittal. The judge can overturn a guilty verdict, but nobody has the power, right? So jury nullification only works one way, right? And jury and the reasons, right, why people nullify, there's so many reasons why, right? They believe that the law is unjust, generally.
Right.
They believe that the law is unjust as applied in this case.
Right.
They believe that the punishment may be too severe. Or they may just be putting their middle fingers up to police that come into their communities and visit violence. They may be putting their middle finger up to the prosecutor that legitimizes that visitation of violence. They may be putting their middle finger up to the judge that rubber stamped all that behavior from the police to the prosecutor, right? So there are a milieu of reasons why people nullify. And oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, nullification only matters in individual cases. But that's not true, right? And we've seen it historically. We've seen it in, thank God I can enjoy my old fashions legally, right? Because during the Prohibition era, right, like prosecutors found it incredibly difficult to get convictions on people who were making alcohol, who were drinking alcohol, right? Wow. And so you almost render the law improsecutoriable. I don't even know the word, right? You can't prosecute the law anymore.
So jurors in those cases were acquitting because they like to drink.
Correct. I mean, or just because they thought the law was stupid, right? It could be whatever the reason, right? And nobody can check you and even ask you why, right? But the power of jury nullification means that over time, right, these acquittals pile up.
Yeah.
And they render laws. Why can I not think of the word? But you essentially just can't prosecute this particular law because you can't get convictions.
Right. So a couple of things that you have me thinking about. So you said a lot of times people would nullify because they think the punishment is too harsh. And a lot of people don't even know about this power to nullify. So my question is, why can't us as defense lawyers tell jurors about this power to nullify? And most jurors, in my experience, in my minimal experience, don't know what the punishment is. Many times they don't know how much time someone's being exposed to. Thankfully, we sometimes we can't talk about it. Sometimes we have jurors who are like, you know what, I'm gonna look at myself and see what this person's facing and have that information. But if you're not like that, somebody could be making a decision and having no idea that, oh, your decision just meant somebody's doing 5 years minimum in prison. So like, why can't we talk to jurors, we as defense lawyers, about, number one, this very important power to nullify, and number two, about what the punishment likely could be for our clients that we're defending?
There are so many ways to answer that question, but I think the most straightforward way is the criminal legal system it has this weird ass commitment to the disenfranchisement of Black and brown people. And so as defense attorneys, if we can educate the community about their power to nullify, what we are in essence doing is taking power away from judges and prosecutors and shifting it to the community, right? All power going back to the people where it belongs, right? Because jury nullification really does act as a check and balance on laws, right? And so if you think about a criminal trial, not to really get into the weeds of this, but the jurors are only allowed to consider the law as the judge gives it to them, right? So the judge is fucking Oz during trial, right? He's the one, or they're the one, or she's the one with the power, right, to determine what laws go to the jury, right? Because even before the law gets to the jury, we're arguing about what laws go to the jury, right? And so they're giving the law to the jury, and the jury is only allowed to consider that, right? Which is bullshit, because we have a duty, right? And those are the pieces of Martin Luther King's speeches, right? That the folks forget about when it's his birthday, right? Martin Luther King truly argued civil disobedience, right? He argued that if a law is unjust, right, we have a moral duty to buck against that shit, right? And they're also, kids are not taught that in school either, right? Just I have a dream. But yeah, so that's it. It's a huge part of why we're not allowed to talk about it, because it would be taking power away from those that want to maintain it, right? It's all about law and order. And the best way to keep Black and brown people in line is not tell them about these other powers that they possess.
Now, you said the word disenfranchisement, and that kind of sparked a lot of thoughts in me, especially with respect to jury service, because we see it. We sit down for a trial, and we attorneys, like, we do attorney conducted voir dire in New York, meaning like we get to ask questions and try to find jurors that we think are the best fit for our case, right? Now, we've seen it in the Bronx, in a borough that is 90% Black and brown. we have seen disenfranchisement, especially with respect to jury service.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of want to speak to that. Can you talk about like the ways that the system, being the prosecutors and judges, still try to disenfranchise us and still try to take power from us in serving on the jury?
So before we even get into the actual criminal courtroom, we would first have to talk about the courthouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how juries are comprised in the first place, right? And mostly juries are comprised with voter registration and DMV registration, right? But in New York, bizarrely enough, there is felony disenfranchisement, right? And so that means that if you have a felony conviction, you cannot serve on a jury in New York, right? And that means any felony conviction, right? And in fact, right now, there is a bill in place called Jury of Our Peers, where in order to diversify jurors, in all boroughs in New York City, people with felonies would be allowed to serve on juries. But that's piece number one, right? So they're not going to the places that would cultivate a more diverse veneer, right? They're not looking. I believe they're not looking at. Um, housing like project registrations, right? They're not looking at public assistance benefit registrants in order to create the juror pool, right? They're looking specifically at individuals who are registered to vote and who are registered with the DMV. So that's another way to sort of eliminate a more diverse jury pool, right? So you're only stuck with folks. I mean, if we're thinking about the Bronx, you're only stuck with folks that are coming from more affluent parts of the Bronx.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, like, it goes deeper than that too,
Yeah,
right? Like
it really does.
we're just talking about right now the pool of people they pull from, right? Now, let's say amongst that pool, there
Oh,
are
you talking about the coded ass language that the prosecutors
you
be
know,
using?
you know, you know where you know where I'm going. You know, amongst that pool, there. Let's say there is a pool that's drawn from, you know, the pool that they pick, and then people make it into the actual veneer. And there's a point where judges and prosecutors still want to take that power away. Can you talk to that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that they love to ask is, have you been a victim of a crime? Right? When they want somebody off, they'll ask about people being victims of crimes. They'll ask about people's perspective on law enforcement, knowing that the likelihood that someone of color in the Bronx has had a fucked up experience with law enforcement, right? I'm dual degree. And I've had horrible experiences with law enforcement,
Me too.
right? And you know, my perspectives on law enforcement isn't pretty. They aren't pretty, right? And so I'm mad I said dual degree and still said isn't pretty, right? Whatever. But yeah, that's one of the ways, right? They use coded language, right? This person can't be fair and impartial because they've had fucked up experiences with law enforcement, right? As somehow Black people paint with broad brushes, and we lose our ability to critically think just because we've had bad experiences with law enforcement, which is grade A bullshit. It's just the way, right? That and how they use their preemptive challenges, their preemptive strikes, in order to strike all Black people or all Black and brown people from juries.
Can we elaborate on what preemptive strikes means and what we mean by that?
Absolutely. So a preemptive strike is basically a strike. So depending on the severity of the charges, you get a number of strikes, right?
Which means that we get to decide who should not be in the jury pool.
Correct. So you are eliminating individuals from the prospective jury panel, but you don't have to give a reason for those particular strikes.
Yeah, we get to do it as defense lawyers.
We get to do it as defense lawyers, but we use our strikes for different reasons often. You know, historically, prosecutors have used preemptive strikes for exactly the reasons that we're talking about, right? To eliminate Black and brown people from juries. And so now you have the case of In Walks People v. Batson, right? Which is a case that says that there are protected classes, right? Because it was recognized that prosecutors were using their preemptive strikes to eliminate Black and brown people. And I think it's important to note for your audience that when you are eliminating people using your preemptive strikes, you don't have to give a reason.
Right.
You don't have to give a reason. And so, as defense attorneys, we have to be vigilant and like looking at who they're eliminating, right? And if we notice a pattern, we can do what's called the Batson challenge, right? And don't get me wrong, it can go both ways, but it rarely does. And so with Batson, we're basically saying that the prosecutor is using their preemptive strikes to eliminate protected classes. And those protected classes being people that are in particular races, right? So a particular race, a particular gender, from the jury.
Wow. I know Conrad had a trial a few years ago where he did a Batson challenge, and it was just wild to see how it came out.
The two of them. I mean, in that trial that you're talking about, right? I raised the Batson challenge because I saw what was going on. Right. Like I saw them strike 2 Black people in a row, and I was like, hold on a second, what they trying to do here? Because like there weren't that many Black people in the veneer, and they were striking Black men. And, just this was a case. It wasn't police brutality per se. It was more court officer brutality. And so like it had that flavor, right? And so like I saw them striking the Black man. I was like, I know what you're trying to do, right? And so I raised a challenge, right? And when you raise a challenge, the judge is supposed to stop and they have to ask the prosecutor for race neutral reasons, meaning like, are you doing this for a reason that is outside of like this person's race, right? And you know what the prosecutor said? They said, one, this person made a joke, right? this first person made a joke, and the second person was 5 minutes late after lunch, right? Those were their reasons for why they were striking.
And the judge, a white man, accepted it and
always rubber stamping their behavior.
No pushback.
But I think that's a reason why, I go around trying to encourage people to not just be on juries, but to harness their power to nullify, right? It's those reasons, right? Like a huge part of this is that police and prosecutors and judges bank on people not wanting to engage in a system, right? Making this entire process fucking unbearable for not just the community, but for our clients as well, right? Because it's not a military secret that an arrest has enmeshed consequences in it, right? And so, and for all of this though, right, it's not just for our clients that are sort of bearing the brunt of this bullshit, right? The people who are coming, I actually participated in jury service because I was like, you know what? I want to see this bullshit for myself. Like I want to see sort of how to go through what the experience is like for people, right? And it was some level 37 bullshit. We sat in the juror room all day. And that alone felt like a waste of my fucking time, right? And I'm a lawyer, right? And I'm in the building where I work, right? That I'm paid to be. Now I'm thinking about the person who, has a family that they have to feed, and this $40 sitting around doing nothing where they could actually be at work. Like I get it, right? Like I get why people don't want to participate, because participation can feel unbearable, right? Then we go upstairs to the courtroom. The judge has no respect for the people who are there to serve, right? Completely wasting and disrespecting people's time, and then telling them to come back the next day after they've done nothing all day. They don't know if people have the socioeconomic means to come back, meaning car fare. $2.75 or $2.90 may mean nothing, to me, but it may be everything to somebody else, right? And judges take that for granted. So I get, the resistance, but we do have the power to shift. We really do.
All right, I want to elaborate more on jury nullification and dive a little deeper into it. So we talked a little bit about the things that we tell jurors during during the jury selection process. And like you said earlier, one of the main questions that a judge will always come back to asking somebody is, can you be fair and impartial? That's like the main question to ask every juror. So my question to you is, if we're telling people about the power to nullify, and someone's like, okay, I want to be the person who nullifies, does that mean they have to lie when the judge says, can you be fair and impartial? And the juror's like, well, I want to nullify, so can I answer that question honestly and still get on this jury and utilize my power to nullify the law?
So one, no, no one should ever lie. And two, harnessing your power to nullify is a moral power and a conscious power you have. You don't have to divulge that to anybody. Just like you don't have to divulge your religion, you don't have to divulge your sexual preference to anyone. Look, the vote of an individual juror is the vote of that individual juror alone. And why they choose to acquit is their own decision, right? And because they have gone into it with a certain perspective of the legal system doesn't mean that they cannot do their power. Excuse me, it doesn't mean that they can't engage their power as a juror, right? So nullifying doesn't mean that you can't be fair and impartial. The fact that you know about nullification and you're willing to use it does
Right.
not mean that you can't be fair and impartial. It doesn't mean that you can't sit and listen to the facts.
Right.
It doesn't mean that. It simply means that you know
Right.
about the illegitimacy of this system,
Right.
and it means that you will nuck if they buck.
Right.
That's really what it means. It does not mean in any way, shape, or form
Right.
that you cannot be fair and impartial.
And in some ways, maybe it's like the quintessential example of being fair and
Right.
impartial, because I understand how
Absolutely.
Right.
unfair and impartial the system is.
system
So here
is.
I am creating
Right.
some balance.
Right, because oftentimes what fair and impartial in the criminal legal system or in criminal legal courtrooms mean is simply I will blindly listen to and follow what the prosecutor and judges say
Yeah.
without questioning it, right?
Right.
Nobody asks the community often before putting forth the law, right? The legislator doesn't necessarily go into communities, right, and ask them, what do you think about this law?
Right.
Nah, it's just a bunch of motherfuckers in the room making decisions, right?
Especially with criminal
And so,
laws.
right.
Right.
And so, why can't the community, right,
Yeah.
make decisions on their own without legitimizing and or accepting blindly
Right.
what courts and prosecutors and police say to them?
That's good. So what I want to do is I want to kind of narrow our perspective on nullification.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually learned about jury nullification when I was in law school.
Mm-hmm.
I had I'll call it a benefit and a privilege to learn and be in the classroom with Professor Paul Butler, who those who are in the legal profession may be aware of who he is and may attribute a lot of their understanding about nullification to him, as he was my introduction to it. Thankfully, I've got to meet you and I've got to learn a lot more since my education with him. Can you talk a little bit about what Paul Butler's, I guess, beginning was as far as what he was encouraging people to do, and what your perspective is on that, and if you agree, disagree, or trying to take his idea a little bit further?
Sure. Now Professor Butler he started off as a prosecutor in AUSA, I believe. And for those that don't know what prosecutors do, black and or white, they generally make their bones on the backs of black and brown people, right? And so at some point in his career, um, AUSA Butler was arrested and processed through the very criminal legal system um, he was a part of, right? Protecting um, crimes that he was prosecuting, right? So, in any event, after going through that process, right, it appears that he had an epiphany based on how he was treated. He had an epiphany and realized that our criminal legal system, the one that he had made his bones on the backs of black and brown people engaging in, was really fucked up, right? And he began to study and write about and advocate for jury nullification, particularly in drug and nonviolent crimes, right? And he believed that or he advocated that because all white juries use the criminal legal system to acquit police officers of white police officers of killing black people,
Mm-hmm.
that white juries would acquit white people in the South for killing black people for whatever they decided that whatever transgression they decided that black person did. Black people should harness the power, more like a racialized acquittal, right? Like white people do it, so black people need to
Take
do
it
it
back.
too,
Right.
right? And I don't disagree with that perspective in total, but when I'm talking about jury nullification, I'm talking about it with the destination always being abolition, right? The destination is to blow all this shit up. I am undoubtedly a public defender and I am a part of this criminal legal system. But my role is to mitigate the damage that is visited on black and brown people, right?
Right.
I am in no way, shape, or form making my bones on the backs of black people. And it's often why I cringe and double over when people are advocating for black and brown prosecutors, like our faces in high places, right, are going to save us. When that's bullshit, right? My clients have never cared about the race of the motherfucker ripping them away from their community, the race of the motherfucker who's made them lose their job, their housing, their children, their, them being deported to another country, right? So, you know, I I appreciate that Mr. Butler is here on the right side now, and I will never diminish or disrespect his appearance. But when I'm talking about jury nullification, I'm talking about it as a tool for Black liberation as we're on this road to abolition.
I love that. I love that, Porsha, because in one sense, when you're saying like white people get to do it, so black people should do it too. What you're doing is lending legitimacy to a system that
And this is
doesn't
all
deserve
bullshit.
legitimacy.
It's all bullshit. This whole system is grade A bullshit. And I'm not saying that because we're defense attorneys, we're better than prosecutors. I'm saying that because we're defense attorneys, we're better than prosecutors. And I'm saying that because our role is to protect Black people. And oftentimes people think that because we're defending the rights of Black people, we don't care about Black safety. And that's all we care about is Black safety, right? And we understand better than anybody the fluidity of Blackness in this country, right? The fluidity of being a Black and brown person in this country, which means that in 2024, my client visited harm on the community. But in 1994, crime was visited on him, right? And so harm was visited on him. And like, we're never saying that Black people don't deserve safety and security. We're saying that Black people deserve safety and security in community, in systems, in all ways.
So here's my question. So I feel like, thank you for that clarity. I do see the big difference between your advocacy and his. But my question is this: I feel like a lot of what you're saying is really palpable for those of us who already subscribe or prescribe to abolition. So my question to you: we just had Brittany walk in the building. Brittany is a non-lawyer, and from New York, a Black person. How would you communicate to Brittany about utilizing her power to nullify? And like what I mean it, not just on victimless nonviolent offenses that Paul Butler talked about. Because I think it's easy to get someone to be on board of like, okay, drugs should be legalized. Okay, someone was not hurt. Okay, I can agree to use my power to nullify. But when we have a situation where somebody has been raped, somebody has been murdered, somebody has been harmed in some actual real way, how do we motivate a non-lawyer, someone who may not really know the rhetoric of abolition or not know the nuances of abolition? How do we encourage them to nullify the law and I guess to explore that power?
So that's a really good question, right? And I think it first comes with a whole bunch of unlearning, right? Because we've been indoctrinated to believe in simple law and order, right? And that is how you go along to get along, right? But what comes with that is the conflation of accountability and punishment, right? And if I am talking to someone who is not a lawyer, it first comes with the unpacking of understanding the difference between accountability and punishment, right?
Yeah.
Our criminal legal system wants fucking blood. They want to pound the flesh from Black men and Black women, right? They want a pound of flesh. It doesn't matter how small the case is, it doesn't matter how big the case is, right? But getting that pound of flesh, getting blood, right? Punishing someone is not going to free us, and it has never made us safe. Never made us safe. And so if we care about safety and we care about security, right? And we care about justice, our criminal legal system as it is right now doesn't perpetuate any of that shit. And so it first comes with an unlearning of what we've been taught, right? Lies our teachers told us, right? And it has to come with this understanding of you did some bullshit, right? In the community. You raped, you robbed, you burgled, right? You committed this harm, and you need to be held accountable for committing that harm. But punishing someone doesn't achieve that, right? It's not going to make you safe. It's not going to make you secure. You know, I was actually doing a training a few weeks ago, right? And there was a dude who was a barbershop owner, right? Had the same exact question, right? Like, what do we do about these violent motherfuckers in our community? Super fair question, right? And so he talked to me about the fact that like somebody came by and like punched a glass in his barbershop. And he was like, I wanted that motherfucker in jail. I wanted that little motherfucker put away. And I was like, huh. It's like, but you still had to clean up the glass yourself. And you still had to pay for the glass to get put back in. So like, cool. Shorty is taken out of the community for whatever short period of time, but he's back, right? But he hasn't been held accountable. He's only been punished, right? What would make more sense is if Shorty had to clean up. If Shorty had to fucking come into the barbershop and work for free and pay off
breaking that glass,
the money that he cost you, right? Like that is what holding someone accountable is. And that is what makes someone invested, right? In their own betterment, right? It's not pulling a motherfucker out of their community, sending them to jail to break their brain cells down and then sending them back into the same community, right?
Because we all know corrections ain't correcting nobody.
Adult babysitters. But also too, it really is just that, like, if we care about pendulum shifts and we care about, you know, not doing what we've been doing so we can stop getting what we've been getting, we have to question and delegitimize this system. And I am not trying to say that jury nullification is the end all or be all, right, of the woes of Black folk. What I am saying is that if you want safety and you want an opportunity to tell the system how you want to be policed, how you want to be prosecuted, if at all, jury nullification is the way until we blow this bitch up.
I was gonna ask for some parting words, but that's how you package it up.
That's the game.
Conrad, Porsha, thank you.
The pleasure's all mine.
I really wish we could continue this for like another couple of hours.
It's all good.
Thank you.
It's all good. The pleasure's mine. Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Of course.
I appreciate you.
This is important to me because, like you said earlier, we can't walk into a jury room and tell them, hey, you have a right to nullify.
Oh, absolutely. Once they're in the courtroom, it's too late.
Right. But you know what's funny? Me, you, and Arouge, we're talking about things that we can advise people to do to like check on their public defender, ways to like figure out if you have a good lawyer or not.
Yep.
And like one of the main things she said is like Google your lawyer.
Word.
So what I love the fact that we're putting this content out here, because if I get Googled, hopefully they'll find the podcast, they'll find this, learn about jury nullification, and be like, you know what, I'm gonna get on this jury now. You know what I'm saying?
My client gonna be like, I see my lawyer on there in horses and J's. I am not trusting this motherfucker.
and white pants before Memorial Day. I had that one in the chamber. I was waiting.
She was waiting on that one. But yeah, I think this is so important because it's a tool to get information out there that we can't do in a courtroom.
Absolutely.
And I hope that one day someone can be like, you know what? I watched your podcast.
Absolutely.
I listened to Porsha about jury nullification. And when I got my jury notice, I got on the jury.
I got on the
and I
jury.
nullified.
Without
That would be
Keep
a
me
beautiful
off. They
full
couldn't
circle.
keep me off that motherfucker.
Conrad, any parting words you want to leave with the people?
You know, I think like jury service is something that, as we have talked about, is historically denied from us.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there's utility on being on a jury, as we talked about already.
Right.
So, like, to the extent that you can, to the extent that you really want to buck the system, to the extent that you don't fuck with the police, you don't fuck with prosecutors, you don't fuck with judges, the way to really get at them, you know, at least within the confines that we are boxed in right now, is get on the jury. I'd be like, I don't give a fuck what you talk about. I am not convicted.
Right. I like that. And I think I'm going to take a more stern approach. And I'm going to call out every prospective juror that has left jury duty on the basis of being an abolitionist.
Absolutely.
I'm calling them
Call them out.
Absolutely.
If you just don't want to be on the jury, fine. If you have better things to do, fine. But don't base your reasoning on I'm abolition. I don't believe in the system. Therefore, I'm not going to be on this jury. Because if you really are about this abolition business, then you will be on the jury and you will do the abolition work. So that's a call out to anybody who calls himself an abolitionist. If you get the call to be on a jury, we'll see if you bat it or not.
Absolutely.
Porsha, you get the last words. What's the last thing you want to leave the people?
Nullify. Nullify. It is our moral duty to buck up against unjust police, prosecutors, and judges.
Yeah.
Nullify.
2 tears in the bucket.
Fuck it.
Fuck it.
Get it. All right, y'all. We've come to the end of another episode. Porsha, thank you. We love you so much.
Thank you, Porsha.
And hopefully we can have you back here.
Without question.
Cool.
Bye.